we're taking care of that. Paul and I are going to watch that.
Okay, we are live.
Okay. Catalin, I'm not seeing anything in the feed on YouTube.
Yeah, it has a bit of latency. It will come. I see now Janine.
There it is. Okay, good. There's Janine having a drink of water. Perfect.
Yes.
Here's you.
Okay.
All right, good. So I can begin now?
Yeah.
And we don't have other people in here yet, though, right? We just have people watching us on YouTube. All right, so it's good to be with everybody today. Welcome. Thank you. We're Lean Talent Systems, and our 4 principals are here today, and I'm going to introduce you to them very briefly, and then I'll introduce our presenter today as well. First, I'd like to introduce you to Paula Anderson-Findley, and Paula is going to be responding, and she'll be helping with slides, and she'll also be watching for your questions that come through, as will I. I'm Sid Jacobson, if you don't know me. I'm the Director of Lean Talent Systems, along with my colleagues here. So I'll tell you very briefly about me. I'm an NLP trainer, that's Neuro-Linguistic Programming, if you're not familiar with that. NLP is something that all of us are very familiar with. I'm an NLP trainer. Catalin Zaharia is an NLP trainer, and Paula Anderson-Findley and Janine Clark are both NLP practitioners, all very steeped in this subject for many years. So this is what I do. I've written a number of books, and we have this wonderful company that we'd like you to become more familiar with. You've all seen the website a little bit, and we invite you to bounce around in there as you'd like, and we'll be pointing things out to you over the next few days. And obviously, this is the first of 4 days. So today will be about an hour and a quarter, and it'll be the same each day at the same time for the rest of the week. So besides myself, as I said, we have Paula Anderson-Findley. I'll tell you a little bit about Paula. I've known Paula for somewhere between 25 and 30 years. We're old friends, and we know each other from training organizations and other places. And she's an expert in training and development. She's an expert in organizational development. She has a long history in a number of fields. She worked in healthcare. She was a corporate officer for one of the largest importers, possibly in the world, certainly one of the largest ones here in this country, and has a lot of background also in U.S. government work as well. Very talented, and you'll be seeing Paula tomorrow, along with Catalin Zaharia. So Catalin is in Bucharest, Romania. Paula's in Florida. I'm in New Orleans. And from Bucharest, Catalin is joining us, so it's evening time there. And Catalin is the psychiatrist, and he's just finishing up a PhD as well. His PhD is in a field that's very, very complex. It's all about complexity, actually. So he also brings a great deal of expertise. Besides being an NLP trainer, he's also an expert in the 6 Thinking Hats method. He's an expert in transactional analysis, and has been doing business consulting and coaching and training for a number of years as well. Now, I've known Catalin for over 15 years now. He's a good friend, and I love visiting them there in Bucharest as well. And to introduce our main speaker today, we'll be handing this over in a few moments to Janine Clark. Janine has a PhD in business. She's been a college professor in MBA programs and other business programs for a number of years now in several universities. She's actually run 2 MBA programs. She's also a coach and has also done a great deal of consulting with a number of different kinds of companies and a lot of U.S. government work. And she's located in Washington, D.C. So she's right there in the heart of everything. And sort of a strange time to be talking about Washington with everything going on, but that's where we are. And it's a delight to have you all here listening to us, and it's an honor to be with you. We've been talking about putting something together for quite some time now. We've been a company now for about 3 years, and it's taken us that long to really get off the ground. If you look at our website, you'll see all the different services that we have. So putting this all together has been a long road, and we decided this was a great time to open up to all of you, especially since during these times everybody's in transition. At least most people are in transition of some sort or another, and even those who aren't specifically in transition in their lives or in their work are going through the transition that all of us are as we deal with viruses and the unrest that's going on in our country right now, and all of the other challenges that we face. And so this is something that we wanted to contribute to, our expertise, which is vast in a number of areas, and we wanted to help people out in dealing with it. So that's why we've offered this for free for these 4 days, both to introduce ourselves and our company, but also to really offer our help. And you'll have a good time listening to Janine this morning. She's going to cover some interesting things about business. So just as an overview of the 4 days, Janine's going to be talking about organizations today mostly, and individuals in organizations. That's her expertise as well. And tomorrow, Catalin and Paula will be discussing systems again, but from a different point of view, and allow you to think about things differently. All of us are going to be presenting different points of view than maybe you've ever heard before. And then on Thursday, I'll be sharing some ideas about things we can do for ourselves to make these changes work for us, and how we can be focused on the new reality that we want to have. And on Friday, we'll be having a panel discussion, all 4 of us, talking about these issues. And so we invite you, as we go through the next few days, feel free to use the chat function. You have chat on YouTube. If those of you who are joining us on this site will have a chat function as well. We have 2 platforms, obviously. Those of you watching on YouTube, you can use the YouTube chat. Those of you who'd like to join us on our site, our platform, you'll have some more choices about how to do that, and some more ability to communicate with us. It's extremely secure, which unfortunately also makes it a little more difficult to use, but that's the price. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is offer you, ask as many questions as you'd like. We'd like to give answers directly to you if that's helpful for you, and throughout these few days. And if we don't get to something today, maybe we will tomorrow or the next day. So if there's something that you'd like to know during these 4 days that you'd like us to think about or prepare something for over the next few days, let us know that as well. Okay? So without further ado, I'd like to hand this over to Dr. Janine Clark. Take it away, Janine.
Thank you, Sid. Hi, everybody. I am Janine Clark, and I am in Washington, D.C. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be able to work with my colleagues, and I'd just like to augment a little bit what Sid said. We all work in overlapping areas, and we were talking about the things we were encountering with our clients, and sharing our experience, sharing our knowledge. And what we realized was that there are many different realities right now. There's a lot of change happening, and it's impacting different people in different ways. So rather than making an assumption that it's impacting everybody the same way, we'd like to invite you into this discussion. And we really do invite your comments, questions. We'd like to be able to interact with you live, and as is the beauty of this format. And if you have questions or thoughts and you're watching this later on YouTube, please, we would like to be in the dialogue with you. So the title of this series is Leading into the Future, Navigating Challenges, Change, and Growth. So leading into the future, one of the assumptions we're not making is that all of you are leaders of big corporations. In fact, I believe that we are all potentially in leadership roles because we are all potentially role models. And this is a time period where we definitely need as many role models and as many people that are thinking in terms of how are they leading, how are they inspiring other people, how are they contributing to the future. And so I'm sure a lot of you can relate to the fact that there are a lot of challenges that have come with the recent pandemic, and in fact, we've had challenges every day that pop up. But coupling that with change and growth, and one of my convictions is that this is an incredible opportunity for individual growth as well as organizations to reassess their vision, mission, and growth. And I've been working with a lot of managers in a coaching setting, so one-on-one, and hearing a lot about their different realities, and listening to them as they become more aware that their people they're leading have different realities. So I'd like to, skip to talking about disruption. And Paula's my disruption slide person. So disruption is nothing new. It's certainly present on our minds right now, but it's been a topic of conversation in management and organizations for a long time. In 1989, Dr. Peter Vail wrote a book called Permanent Whitewater, Managing as a Performing Art is the subtitle of that. I had the distinct honor to work with Peter, and his metaphor was that we used to think you plan, you have a strategy, you go and you implement it. And the reality, even back then, was that many organizations he was working with, and certainly the ones I was working with, were that there were game changers happening all the time, and there wasn't ever a time where the whitewater became completely calm. So we didn't get through a product launch and all, or a deliverable or an event, and then calm water. Pretty much, we were going from one set of rapids to another. And another notation for disruption came in 1991, and it came from the U.S. Army. The backdrop was that we were involved in wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and that was where the term VUCA came out. And probably many of you have heard this term. So VUCA is an acronym that stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, all at the same time. So the phrase in management conversations has been, we live in a VUCA world. It is complex, as my colleague Kathleen will talk about more. It is volatile. There can be many changes at once. There also can be disruptive changes that actually are game changers. They change the complete spectrum of how we do what we do, or what is the best way to do something when you think about technology. So do we have any questions or comments? Anything somebody wants to type in just to make sure we get to while we're going through this today? Please feel free. Paula and Sid are monitoring those chats. So since we realize there are many different things happening and everybody has a different reality right now or perspective, I'd like to shift to the next comment, which is what's changed and what has not changed. So what has changed for you? And while we're giving pause for you to certainly write in what's changed for you, I'll just share with you some of the changes that many of my executive clients have been talking about. I work with both in coaching with both executives and new managers, and I find equal challenge in that, and that coaching has just a wonderful venue for growth at both of those stages. So what's changed? A lot of people who did work on site are working remotely. That's a big shift for some, and that's a small shift for others. Ironically, I work with a number of companies in the technology industry, and some of them have had great challenges with shifting to remote work. And you would think that the creators of the technology that allows remote work would be able to quickly adapt. But in fact, there are elements of their work that they need to have a lab for. And some of them were accustomed to working in a very creative format, having interaction all the time. So that change to remote work was not necessarily easy. We know also that people who had jobs that shifted them to working remotely also often had new jobs at home. They were not only parenting during the day, but they were assisting with virtual learning for their children, which meant long hours, or still means long hours, since school isn't out everywhere. And they were finding that it was just a challenge. It was an overload challenge to try and keep up with everything. Fast-paced work, deadlines, children adjusting to learning from home and interfacing with new technology in many cases. And one of the things that really struck me early on was one of my coaches acknowledged, I said, what have you learned about your people in this time? And he said, well, some of us are on overload because we're juggling, our family responsibilities with our work. And some people, we think that maybe the single people, the people that are living alone, have it made because they don't have to deal with that. But in fact, they're more isolated than we are. So there was, I saw managers starting to gain a greater appreciation for the wholeness of the world that some of their employees had. And they also started to see that some of their employees thrived in that environment of working from home, and others had greater challenges. Some of it is, whether you're introverted and extroverted, whether you need that interaction with people and live is just vital to you. And some of that was just learning new ways to communicate with work teams. Some people have lost their jobs, and we'd like to think that this dialogue that we're starting is equally important to you because you're planning your new reality. Other people have been laid off, or their job has been reduced, and they're not sure what that's going to mean in the future. And then we have some people that are working in essential areas where they've been working nonstop with additional stress and concern, and in some very challenging roles. And the volume of what they're dealing with has increased. But I'll move on if there are no comments right now on what's changed. What hasn't changed? Well, we're still in a globally connected world. And certainly the pandemic has been one of the major disruptions that has really emphasized how connected we are. What else hasn't changed? Some people have been working remotely all along. So when people are expressing difficulty and discouragement about having to work from home and learning new systems and interact with students or colleagues through these virtual channels, people who've been working remotely for a long time are sort of like curious. It's like, well, it's a perfectly fine venue. So there are many things that have changed, and there also are many things that haven't changed. Most companies, people are still needing to work in teams. They're still needing to communicate. Employees still need to know what the vision is, what any changes are in operations and policies. So communication is just as vital as ever. And in NLP, we say you cannot not communicate. So this is a time where communication is more important than ever. And if there is not enough communication, in fact, that is communicating something to people. It is communicating a void. So most companies find that they need to communicate more. Managers need to communicate more. It's more important that they keep up with their one-on-ones, things like that. So moving to the next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about resilience.
Janine?
Yes, Paula?
We have a number of people watching us on YouTube, and I just wanted to let you know that people are up on YouTube, and I am interacting with people on our platform's chat.
Oh, fantastic. Is there anything you'd like to share with this audience here?
Not at this moment, but I'm a voice when people are ready to start chatting.
Fantastic. Feel free to jump in whenever appropriate.
You bet.
Okay. So moving on to talk a little bit about resilience on the next slide. So resilience is something that has also been talked about for a long time. Excuse me, we're going to talk about what's on your dashboard first.
That's my mistake, Janine. Do you want to talk about the dashboard first?
I do.
Okay, so, you bet.
Yeah, so what's on your dashboard? We've used the dashboard metaphor, but it's not just a metaphor. Many software programs that people are using in the workplace provide them with a dashboard. And like the dashboard on a car or a plane, there are different monitors and measurements that are keeping an eye on different things. So you might have a dashboard that's keeping track of your family or your children's learning. You might have another monitor on your dashboard that's focusing on a particular project. You might have another dashboard for your team. You might have another dashboard for customer issues. And one of the things is that whatever is on your dashboard, some of those things we say, oh, well, that's my personal life. It's not here, but oftentimes it is in the background. So I'd just like to ask the people who are here, what's on your dashboard? What is it that you're monitoring on a daily basis or having to stay up with and keep connected to? Well, I'll share a little bit about the dashboard that some of us have here at Lean Talent Systems.
Janine, before you get started, if you go ahead and share, I've got a couple people that have given some input on what their dashboard's like.
Fantastic.
Just let me know.
Fantastic. So you'll see that the way this discussion is organized over the 4 days is that part of our dashboard is what's going on for individuals. Another monitor on our dashboard is what's going on with organizations. And then what's going on with different industries, recognizing that those are all different. So Paula, please share something from our participants on their dashboards.
One of the comments, pardon me for that, gang, one of the comments was that this person, who happens to be in a very technical field, has a system where he puts on his dashboard, he identifies 3 things every month. And when he said this, I thought, wow. During this time to pick 3 things and be very goal focused, it is a big deal.
So this is an ongoing practice.
Right. An ongoing practice.
Yeah.
Another comment is much more personal. It's remembering to be kind with the people I work with every day.
Yes. Yep. And with so many different shifts during the day, sometimes we have to remind ourselves of how we want to be in the situations and how we want to be and show up for our people. That's great.
Yeah. And one more is just someone who's choosing to be a little bit more vulnerable, saying to remember why they were chosen by the people that they work with to work there, and that in these times, they do have a significant contribution, to keep that in mind.
Fantastic. Yeah. Very centered. certainly when things get tough, we have to remember that we have been chosen for these roles because somebody or a board of somebody's or a team felt that we were suited for that, and that we have the resources we need to continue to perform in this role, even though many things are changing. That's great. That's great. So, and I love the idea of putting 3 different things or confirming 3 things on your dashboard every month. That continuous learning and growth. Thank you very much. So one of the things is that each of, if you're a manager, each of your employees has their own dashboard. On their dashboard, one monitor might be what my boss's mood is. It might be how much pressure there is on this deadline. And they may have, different family. Perhaps they have family that's in another part of the country or out of the country, and they're concerned about the health environment or the dynamics of the environment they're in. So really, this time has forced us to realize that we're whole people and that we have whole people working for us. And it's a time when I've seen compassion and empathy come out, but it's also a time when if fear creeps in, we can suddenly start just narrowing our vision to ourselves. And remembering that we can have a dashboard helps us to put those things out there that we're going to attend to, in addition to those things that we need to attend to for ourselves. So great, thanks for that conversation. So now moving on to talk a little bit about resilience. And there have been a lot of things written about resilient leadership and the capacity for resiliency and its benefit to leaders, to managers, and to human beings. And so I think the topic of resilience is perfect for now, but it's perfect also for everyone. If you find yourself in a leadership position or a management position, or perhaps you're working in your community, some of the things that leaders can provide in times like this that are particularly valuable is to remind people of what it is we're fighting for, so to speak. What does our organization do? What is its mission, its vision? How are we connected to that? And if we're providing some good or service that's crucial to either the economy or people in our societies right now, reminding people of our connection to that, no matter how long the chain might be between an individual and the customer, or the individual and the product. Another aspect of resiliency for leaders is scenario visualization. And this is something that has been used in strategic management for a long time, and that's usually referred to as the ability to imagine different scenarios in the future. So not being flat-footed, not being so committed to one course of action or one vision, such that you can be ready to shift if need be. And also, by entertaining different scenarios, we often come up with new ideas that we wouldn't have thought of before. And sometimes those ideas serve us immediately, and sometimes those ideas become valuable down the line. So the practice of scenario visualization. And we don't know exactly what the future is going to be like, and so that's valuable. And altruism. Again, avoiding the position of narrowing your vision to what do I need to do right now to what is it I can do to help my people work better? What is it that I can do to make this day better? And a concern for those that you work with, or those around you, or those in your community. Another one is situational agility. So corporate policies and practices have in the past, they used to be very firm, and we've seen a progression of organizations to having more flexibility with their policies and practices. But we need to have even greater agility in assessing different situations and different ways of working with people and working with deadlines and working with our customers. So the other thing that's part of resilient leadership is decisiveness. And this is one of the ones that is difficult sometimes for people in good times and becomes harder when you've got ambiguous situations, you've got uncertainty in the future, and you may not have all the data you need. And yet, as managers and leaders, we're called to make decisions, and putting off decisions can actually cause more damage and more anxiety than making a decision. So becoming more comfortable with making decisions with as much data as possible and thinking through different scenarios, but making a decision. And as you'll hear my colleagues talk about in the next few days, our language is extremely important, the language we use. It impacts not only our thinking and our behavior, but the thinking and behavior of the people that we work with. So does anybody have anything they'd like to say about resiliency?
Right now, I don't have anyone commenting on resiliency.
Okay.
And for those people, if there's any problems on their end that they're not able to interact with us, I have been typing some information in our platform's chat that's accompanying what your slides are indicating.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, great. And I guess I would add one more thing about resilience. I have had many people say to me, "You are so resilient." And they refer to things that I've dealt with in my life, things that are not necessarily unique. But when you think about the things that lead us to say, oh, that person is resilient, in my case as a cancer survivor, and people, talk about my resilience in the way I went through treatment and came through. And I had a catastrophic car accident that left me in a wheelchair, and I had to go through the process of learning how to walk again. And so people said, "You are so resilient." And I heard them, and I felt that. I mean, I have a real, very much a goal orientation, and I've been an athlete my whole life. So setting those goals and working towards them was very focusing for me. It made me feel good, and I did prove to be resilient. But what I didn't realize until just the other day, and when you're a coach, you also work with other coaches and coach each other occasionally. And a breakthrough that I had was that resilience isn't just my past and how I've dealt with my past. Resilience is something that I carry into the future for dealing with new things. And that may sound like a very small switch, but it was a huge switch for me personally. Yes, I have been resilient, but when I shift that to the present, I am resilient. And the future, my resiliency is going to help me deal with all the uncertainty, the changes that come my way in the future. It's very empowering. And in my field, we do a lot of reflection. So to suddenly realize that I thought of resilience as something that got me through in the past, but I wasn't giving myself credit for having that quality going forward, was a huge shift. So again, my colleagues that are going to be joining us the next few days will be talking about that connection between the language and our thinking and our behaviors, and how we use all of those to our best advantage to create a new reality, to create the reality that we want. So one of the things that has proved valuable to many of the people that I've been coaching, and I call it raising your eyes to the horizon. And this is something that I have coached managers on for a long time, but it took on new meaning when we had the pandemic. So a quote that I love, which I think was on a comic, so I'm sorry I can't provide you the attribution, the author of it, but the quote is, "Never mistake the edge of the rut for the horizon." And the little comic that went with that was hysterical. It had a little person, looking up over an edge and just seeing over that edge, but you could see a longer horizon. And in this time when we're working in new ways, maybe remotely or maybe without some team members, there is a need to focus on short-term essentials, the deliverables, the launches, the customer needs, project milestones. We can get so caught up in that's the majority of our focus. So what's the value of a manager helping others to raise their eyes to the horizon? So connecting what we're doing today to the mission, the vision, or the value to society keeps people connected to purpose, meaningfulness. It doesn't distract them from the fact that they have challenging deadlines. Sometimes people have more work because of the nature of work being remote. But keeping your people connected to the fact that we have a long-term horizon. The challenges that we're dealing with right now are not going to stay the same. And companies are looking for new ways to be in the future or ways to survive this period so they continue to have their core strengths in the future. But your ability to connect what's going on now, whether it be challenging, deadline-oriented, or just darn hard to deal with, connecting that to the horizon, okay? Knowing that we're moving in a direction. And I also work with organizations a lot with strategy. And organizational strategy, of course, is something that has been a practice for quite some time. It's actually become a science, the science of strategic management. And it focuses both on short-term and long-term, short-term usually being in the next year, long-term being 5, 10, 20 years. And typically, strategy has a present to forward approach. Where are we now and where are we going? Where we want to be in 5 years. And we're looking at how do we sustain our performance? How do we keep our people performing and keep the right people in our organization, have the right talent that we need to move forward to the vision for our company in 5 years or 10 years. So we're thinking about sustaining performance. We're thinking about the talent that we have and staying on track. But there's another alternative that has come up that has been coined as the future back process. And Mark Johnson talks about this in his book, which is called Lead from the Future, How to Turn Visionary Thinking into Breakthrough Growth. And he talks about the tendency for us to be reactive right now, for us to react to market changes, to react to supply chain issues, and that if we can just set aside 10 or 20% of our time to think more about the long-term future and come back, that thinking will help us to become more resilient as organizations. If we're thinking future and back, many organizations may actually have to reinvent their core. They may see that the future is going to be virtual rather than live, or it's going to be a hybrid, but they need to be agile for both. If you look at the example of how newspapers reacted when digital print first started to become prevalent, the reaction of the newspaper industry was, first just to get a copy of what their content was online. So it was taking a paper-based approach and putting it in a digital format. But newspaper and news organizations have completely shifted what they're about and how they do it since then. There's live news, there's interactive news, there's hyperlinks, their digital gets as much attention, and sometimes their digital interaction drives the paper. Some no longer have paper. Some are completely digital. It's led to new business collaborations. So when you think of the future back, it means imagining a future that doesn't exist right now. And that could be the future of a company, a team, a family, a community. So this business of being able to just sort of check out of where we are right now and just think of the future and not be tethered by the constraints we have right now. And if you can envision that future working backwards and seeing new steps that will get you to that new future, that new reality. Anybody have any comments on that? What you've been dealing with in your organizations or with your communities?
Janine, we do have a comment in our chat, and it was following on with your idea about resiliency and how important the ability to reflect on how we have acted and to be able to use that to help that shift and focus that you were discussing when you identified for yourself in some of your life events where you had developed resiliency was the rear view mirror, which was very supportive and comforting.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, the great aha that we're all so happy to get when we have them in our lives about being able to have it in the present and will have it in the future. So the comment is saying how important this is in our business lives as well, around aligning with our mission and our clients' needs and our personal resiliency, so that we can be true to ourselves and true to our work.
Great comment. Absolutely. True to ourselves and true to our work. And sometimes we can help others recognize their strengths and resiliency. It's not, we're not always the first ones to know about ourselves. Often others see things in us that we don't see. For those of you familiar with the Johari window, you know, often personal growth comes through greater awareness, and that's only gained through our interaction with others and feedback that we get from others. So yes, absolutely. So just to summarize a little bit more on that, strategies by definition have really, they've always been about where to play and how to win the game, right? Competitive advantage, finding a new market. But now the questions on the table that are worth considering at least 10 to 20% of the time might be, what is the game we should play? Are we prepared to play a new game? So what it really means is, you know, this future back approach is a new mindset. It's having a different mode of learning and to talk about what is possible. And I love that that the topic of learning has already come up in that last comment that you shared, Paula, from one of our participants. Because in my work as an organizational development specialist and as a consultant to teams, as a coach to individuals and teams, the whole key to life for me is learning. Learning, if you want an app for everything, for me, the killer app is learning and knowing more about ourselves and how we learn. Paula, do you want to shift to the next slide?
Janine, I love that. The killer app is learning.
It's a killer app. That's the app that you have. I've always wanted an app for cleaning my house so that I wouldn't have to do it. But really, the most powerful app any of us have is within ourselves and our ability to learn and our agility in learning. So we may have strategic agility, but do we have agility in how we learn? So when we look at the learning process, and this also applies to strategy, is, we have a challenge. We decide what strategies and techniques we have, and we decide what we're going to do, and then we do them, the strategy implementation, and then we get results. And if those results were good enough, or the ones we needed, then sometimes we leave it there. So what we've actually done is problem solving. And one of the problems with this approach is that we sometimes are applying strategies and techniques that worked yesterday for yesterday's situation, but today's situation is different. The context may be different. It may be the same issue of delegation and work assignments and teamwork, but the context has changed. So the single loop learning process, which is often problem solving, is good. I mean, it's what we do, but it's not getting the most out of learning for ourselves as managers, or for ourselves as leaders. So if people ask me, what's one thing you would tell me? And so I was on site with an organization for about 3 years. And when they said that, I said, okay, what's one thing I would share with people in my role? And I was an organization change agent, I was a coach, I was a team developer, I was helping with organizational strategy. I thought, what would I put on my door? Because people had things on their doors. So if we move to the next slide, you will see exactly what I put on my door. So double loop learning, and some of you may be very familiar with this. Schoen and Argyris were the first two to actually write about this. And people since then have talked about triple loop learning. But for the time being, double loop learning has something that I feel is valuable to every human being, and particularly given that things are always changing. So with single loop learning, we had a problem or an issue or a challenge. We made some assumptions, we came up with strategies and techniques, we implemented them, and we got results. And so if the results were pretty close to what we wanted, we might just, repeat, go back, that single learning loop. But what's more valuable for people today and for managers and leaders is double loop learning. So you get results, right? We come up with our best strategy, we get results. Maybe it's 90% of what we wanted, maybe it's 100% of what we wanted. But taking time with your teams to do an after action report, and also a time for yourself in reflection, is going back and looking at, okay, what were the assumptions that I made? What was the data that I gathered? How did I weight that data? How could I do it better next time? What other strategies or techniques could I engage? And then doing something different. And you've probably heard the phrase, if you do the same thing, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. And if things are changing from day to day, the results that you got yesterday may not be adequate for tomorrow. And the truth about human beings is that we all make assumptions. We have to. Some of those assumptions allow us to then adopt a strategy to find the way forward. Some of those assumptions are blind spots. Some of those assumptions are about what our people are capable of, and we maybe are short selling them. Or maybe we don't know how they want to develop and what they'd be willing to do, how they'd be willing to pitch in. So the one thing that managers today and leaders have very little of is time. And so taking the time for reflection, whereas it seems like that's a luxury, it actually is the biggest advantage that people have, because that reflection that can come about when you do the double learning type of processing, that reflection allows you to get the deeper learning. It allows you to become more familiar with your assumptions, more familiar with how you weighted the data and made decisions on your strategies and techniques. So this is indeed a graphic, or a version of a graphic, that I put on the outside of my door for the 3 years there. And if I had one thing to offer people to improve their lives, to improve their work, to help them with their career, it would be this understanding this concept and the value of double loop learning. And again, with time pressures and having too many things on our dashboard, or needing to have so many things on our dashboard, often we don't take that time for reflection. I often tell the people I coach, you know, you book appointments with everyone else, book an appointment with yourself for 10 minutes at the end of the day to reflect. If you have an important project, make sure you do an after-action meeting. Talk about all the good things that went well, what didn't go as well, what was going on for different people, what ideas they have. That's where you gain the edge. That's where you're building knowledge, you're building the process of learning, and you're building your team to be more capable. So there you have the outside of my door. Any other questions?
I don't have any questions now, but I bet the people that are with us are wondering if you're going to have us do some reflecting.
I am. Let's move on to the next slide. So we've talked about change, we've talked about challenge. Now I want to talk about growth and why this environment is a fantastic environment for growth. So when I work with individuals on action plans for their development, I have them choose activities that are going to allow them to develop more or enhance their competencies within their job environment. So they're not doing homework, they're not going off to a management seminar, they're taking a part of their work and they're looking at how they do it, and they're experimenting with, could they do it another way? So we know that from research, about 70% of what people learn that's of true value to their career, they learn on the job. And that statistic came from the Center for Creative Leadership, which is noted at the bottom of this slide. About 20% of what people learn that they felt was valuable to their career, they learned from other people. From mentors, from watching other people, from seeing examples of what they wanted to be like, seeing examples of what they did not want to be like. And then 10% comes from those formal training things that we do. And of course, if you're in an area that's highly technical, you have to go to some technical training. But Bob Eichinger and Mike Lombardo did research at the Center for Creative Leadership and found there were 11 elements that were characteristics of developmental experiences. And I have a worksheet for you that we're going to send out to you. And the process for getting that worksheet, which is going to be basically what's on the next 3 slides, would be to send an email to info@sidjacobson.com. Am I correct, Sid?
No, let's put that to the Lean Talent Systems. I'll put the
Ah,
address right here in the chat.
sounds great. Thank you. So we do have a worksheet for you, and we're hoping that you might find it valuable and do it, and perhaps even be willing to share it with us before, when you come back to another session. So the characteristics of development experiences when I'm working with individual contributors, managers, leaders. A project where success and failure are both possible and will be obvious to others. A second quality or characteristic is that it's something that requires an assertive take charge leadership. Decisive, that decisiveness we're talking about. Stepping up. Number 3 involves working with new people, a lot of people, or both. And I think you probably could add there working with people in new ways or through new venues. Number 4, creates additional personal pressure. Okay, who wants more pressure? Well, we actually have a certain amount of pressure that can bring us to higher achievement. And that pressure also pushes us to be more creative, to think of new ideas. And a 5th characteristic is a project or activity that requires influencing people, activities, and factors over which you have no direct authority or control. And I will say that the majority of the managers that I work with today are working cross-functionally. So their ability to influence across functions and their ability to build relationships across functions are essential. So if you could type into the chat, which ones of these 5, we'll go through the other 6, do you most relate to? Are there 1 or 2 that you definitely relate to as far as what you're going to be dealing with right now or what you are dealing with? So when I'm helping people find ways to develop, we capture an activity or a task that they would have to do anyways in their job or that they could stretch and do in their job, and it has some of these elements. So let's look at the other 6 that make up the 11. On the next slide, and we'll come back to, so if you've typed in numbers, we're going to come back to this for conversation and some joint reflection. So other characteristics of developmental experiences, and again, this came from the research of Eichinger and Lombardo, is activities that involve high variety. And certainly in times of change, usually there is more variety or more new. 7, something that will be closely watched by people whose opinions count. So whether you're working on a project in your community, whether you're working on a project at work, whether it's a project that's part of your job or whether it's something that you've taken on as a stretch assignment, something that's going to be visible and watched by people whose opinions are valuable, or might be making decisions for your work in the future. Number 8, something that requires building a team, starting something from scratch, or fixing a turnaround, and turning around a team or an operation or project that has been in trouble. So, that project that nobody wants to take on, it's been a problem, it hasn't worked before, and yet it's still a priority for the organization. That's the kind of challenge that will truly help you develop your capacity for effectiveness, your capacity to grow, and your capacity for influence within the organization. And 9, something that has a major strategic component and is intellectually challenging. 10, something that involves interacting with an especially good or bad boss or with individuals with very different styles of management or leadership. And I would throw in there cross-cultural when it involves interacting with people from different cultures. And 11, another characteristic is if you have a project or a responsibility for something where there is something important missing, such as top management support, key skills or technical knowledge on the team, only partial data, not all the data you want, or established credentials or credibility. Maybe you're doing something that's new for you and you don't have the title that will give you that immediate credibility. So I'm seeing some things in the chat. Chat here, and so number 5, which if we can go back to the slide, this is a nice point. If you can go back one slide, Paula.
I'm right with you here.
Okay. So Nancy was saying 5, and it's a given for consultants and coaches, and for direct managers and leaders, it is hard learning. It is. It is, and sometimes it lends itself to long-term frustration. Sometimes it leads people to choose not to be in management. But truly, when you think about work that we do, if it's work in our community, we're often in that kind of position. We're trying to influence people, activities, and factors over which we don't have all the control or authority. We're trying to influence, we're trying to gain followership, we're trying to gain participation. And so I see one more comment, just shifting my screen here so I can see the whole comment. So Carmen, you're saying resilience within personal development requires additional personal pressure from inside out. So as to say it has to be designed as a cause, not dealt with as an effect. Wow, that's great. Yeah. So those of us who have a constant learning agenda, who feel that continued self-awareness is crucial, and so we're incorporating that as part of our mission in everything we do. We carry that little bit of personal pressure. And I will say one thing, that again, some research at the Center for Creative Leadership, when they were trying to figure out back in the 80s why there were fewer women rising in the ranks, and they did something that I call backward research. And they interviewed women who had reached this rank that they were looking at, whether it be vice president level. And they interviewed women that had not. And they also interviewed men. One of the factors was that the women that had made it to those higher levels had had the opportunity to take on a project and manage it from start to finish. So it was theirs. They had to take charge. They had to work with new people. They had to influence and get people working with them. It was visible. Success and failure were both possibilities. And it gave them visibility because it was going to be seen by others who count. So they discovered that one of the key development factors for people, both genders, was having the opportunity to have a project that was theirs from start to finish. And giving your people the opportunity for those projects is a way to help develop them and give them opportunities to advance. So let's move to slide 2 again, because I didn't ask which ones on slide 2 struck you as something you're going to be dealing with. Any of those speak to you?
You know, for me, Janine,
Yeah.
There are two parts of this that are very interesting. Numbers 5 and 11 to me go together in a particular way. Maybe somebody else has some ideas about this as well. But in number 5, when we're talking about influencing people or activities that we don't have any control over, I was thinking about that in terms of something that Paul and I were working on this project, and you from a distance earlier last year with a convention center, and they have a number of suppliers, and they have a number of outside people. Like there's an outside company that's contracted to do some of the cleaning, and then they have outside companies that cater, events for thousands of people and stuff like that. And they also have contractors because they're doing a major renovation, moving streets and everything. And I was thinking about being able to influence all those outside companies as well as your own.
Yes.
And how difficult and challenging that is. And then when I looked at number 11 as well, I was thinking about it sort of in the same terms, where something's missing. Well, what's missing is direct influence. And what might be missing is any kind of support that you're talking about, or even the knowledge of how those people actually run their business, but you still have to influence them. And
Right.
This seems to me it's something that's sort of built into a lot of different kinds of companies. If you're a contractor building buildings, you're subcontracting almost everything. You're doing the design, but you hire architects, you hire designers and planners, and you have to deal with agencies and getting all the licensing and things that you need to do, and then you're hiring people to do all the different kinds of building. All of these things are things where you don't have control over deliverables necessarily. You don't have control over other people's performance necessarily. And these things are challenges with or without the changes that are going on now, but with so many things changing, people are going to be dealing with new supply chains, new people that they're working with, and doing their work in totally different ways. Those things are going to even be more of a challenge than they were to begin with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have another comment, Janine.
Yes.
Often teams are pushing so hard, and this kind of goes to what Sid was talking to, where we have our teams or the front lines or the boots on the ground or whatever's the language of your industry and company or organization, and they really are looking to how do we take all these outsiders and have them understand our culture, our vision, our mission, exactly what you're talking about. How do we influence them and bring them into, for this project, what they're subcontracting for or whatever it might be, a part of us?
Yes. Yes. And I'm just reading that full comment, which I love. Often teams, this is Nancy's, often teams are pushing so hard in unproductive ways that it seems like they are pushing their bike as fast as they can rather than taking deliberate time to stop, connect, and then hop on. Absolutely. Yeah. Teams can go into anxiety and be working even against each other and be less productive.
It reminds me of our friend Scott, who has a company called Square Wheels.
Yes.
He developed with all those cartoons, and his main cartoon was a bunch of guys pushing a giant cart that has square wheels, and the cart is loaded up to the top with round ones. But they're pushing and pulling and trying to get this thing to go, and they never stop and look inside to see what they might have instead. A new way to look at what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. And number 11 is one that really speaks to me as far as my clients. I work with a multinational technology company, and often managers are forced to make decisions with partial data. And it makes it extra important to know the sources of your data, the credibility of your data, but the nature of their work, they talk about needing to be able to see around the corner. And that decisiveness, the need to be able to make a decision when you have enough data, but maybe not all the data. And one of the things about this time and decisiveness is that the data today may be different from the data tomorrow. So we may make the best decision we can today, and then a week from now, we may have to revisit that because there's new data or more data. When you think about the pandemic and how, we're collecting data on what's worked in different countries, what's worked for different processes in different cities, there's been a ripple effect. So we've had the opportunity to learn from countries that have dealt with the pandemic before us. However, it's partial data because maybe their population was older than ours, or maybe the dynamics of their interaction were different. So with this pandemic, leaders all over the world have been having to make decisions and take action with partial data, but continuing to collect data. So without making a decision, you can't take action. But knowing that the data is going to change means you have to have that on your dashboard. Yeah, and Paula just said, seeing around the corner, having enough data, but not necessarily all the data. And the managers I work with in high tech talk about, I need to stretch my comfort zone and take a few risks, but calculated risks. Because if we wait for all the data to come in, oftentimes the competition will already have developed what we're working on. So let's move to the next slide.
And Janine, we're doing really well on time. It's about a few minutes before our hour and 15 minutes on the session.
Great. So it's about 12:12 Eastern Standard Time. So the handout that we want to share with you, and Sib will be mailing back to you, has those 11 characteristics of developmental assignments, and then these 2 questions. And so again, what we've had a little bit of dialogue around here, which of those 11 challenges are relevant to your work in the near term? And then moving forward, how can you personally increase your capacity as a leader through these challenges? And we're hoping that this piece that we've sent you, which is, again, we've taken this resource from the Center for Creative Leadership, and we'd like to challenge you on how it's appropriate to your work or your endeavors today. Thinking about your own development and why this is a particularly ripe time for developing. It may be uncomfortable, but no matter what position you're in, you are needed. And most likely you have all the resources you need. But as we know about resources, it's how we use them. It's how we trust them. It's how we trust ourselves.
Janine, let me jump in just to remind people, it's info@leantalentsystems.com, our website that you've all been to. And I'll send you a PDF that has these questions as well as the 11 points. And I had one more comment I wanted to make too before we wrap up.
Sure.
It didn't occur to me until a few minutes ago when I was looking at these as a whole, that this is something you could do on a regular basis with yourself, couldn't you?
Absolutely. I do it annually.
Just choose a project or a couple of projects every year that meet all these requirements and get yourself to do them. You could use it as a coach, certainly, as you do, but this is something that would also be a great personal development exercise.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be related to your work. If you want to develop in other areas than your work area, then you can use this to apply to your art or your passion in your community.
Right. Right.
Okay, we just had another comment pop up. Use the 11 on your dashboard, 1 or 2 at a time. Is that Paul?
Yeah, I think so.
Love it. Love it. Super. So we're hoping that this session has been valuable to you. We're hoping that you will come back, tell others, because new people can join for the following days. And we hope that the handout will be valuable to you. We would love it if you would share it with us, after you've done it, and or share new questions that you have or thoughts that you'd like us to bring into the discussion in the coming days. So I want to turn it over to Kathleen and Paula for just a minute, because they're going to be talking about organizational systems tomorrow.
Thank you, Janine. I think one of the challenges we just face in our team is the new system and the things how works here. Self-applying is sometimes very good, and indeed challenges are from everywhere, and some are from internal, some are from the external environment, and these days are showing us how it works. Thank you for your input.
Thank you very much. And Paula, do you have something you want to say?
I love that Catalin addressed that, and again want to thank all of you for participating. I enjoyed very much being behind the scenes and literally sitting with the tension and building my capacity for a new reality. And Janine, thank you for all of us that use a little bit of our buzzwords in the neurolinguistics that we've been talking about, holding our state.
Holding our state, yes. And I just want to say one more word. We hope that you will come back. We're going to share this with other people this week. And on Friday, we'll actually be having a panel discussion. And one thing that Sid didn't say is that when he brought us all together to work with Lean Talent Systems, at least this is what he said to me. Maybe he just was flattering me, but he said he wanted to assemble his dream team. And one of the things about working with these 3 colleagues is that it's just phenomenal. They stretch me every day, and I can't wait to go to the sessions that they're offering in the next 2 days myself. So thank you all who visited and came and participated. And we're on the YouTube channel, so even if you have more thoughts and you want to add them there, please do. We look forward to staying in conversation with you.
And thank you, Janine, again, and thank Paula and Kathleen and everybody for making this a very interesting session. And the next few will be as well. So we will see you all tomorrow, I hope. Take care.